Creating simple business forms is often drudgery, the kind of job that administrators look forward to because they know it's going to make their jobs easier. Designers, not so much. But Adobe InDesign CS6 contains new features that make it much easier to create attractive, useful forms. Whether you're building them from Microsoft Word documents that were provided by someone else, or you're creating them from scratch yourself. This chapter of our Total Training InDesign CS6 Essentials course covers how Adobe InDesign CS6's new Forms Creations features can make that task much easier on you if you find yourself creating printed business forms. In this chapter of our InDesign CS6 course, we're going to work with some of the sophisticated type alignment capabilities that are built into Adobe InDesign, as well as explore the capabilities to build sophisticated tables within the program, as well as save table styles for the ones we like that we can use in subsequent InDesign documents. We're going to do that by creating a single page student order form for Total Training. So if you have your welcome screen open on screen just like I have right now, you can click the Create New Document button to create a brand new document. If you don't have this up, simply use the keyboard shortcut Control-N to create a new document within the Windows PC environment, which is what we're using for this chapter of the InDesign course. Or if you're working on a Mac, use the keyboard shortcut Command-N. I'm going to click on the Create New Document button, and what it'll do is it'll open up our New Document dialog box. This shows the default settings, creating a letter, 8.5 by 11 inch page in a portrait or vertical format, and it shows margins of a 1/2 inch all the way around. We can work with this default setting with a single exception. Since we only have a single page document, we're going to turn off the Facing Pages option. Depending on your screen resolution and setup, you may find that this makes your page just a little bit larger as you're working on the screen. I'm going to say OK, and as I do though, we're going to create our brand new InDesign document. Now we don't want to lose our work, so what we're going to do is we're going to save this file before we begin. I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu, and I'm going to select the Save menu command. You'll see that the keyboard shortcut is listed to the right as Control-S. If you're working on a Mac, that keyboard shortcut would be Command-S. I'm going to click that command. And what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to save this in the Chapter 8 folder as my first name, Randy, and the number 8. You don't have to use my name as you save it, but you should use something with your first name and that number 8 so we can say this is the working file we're using for this chapter of the InDesign CS6 course. I'm going to click the Save button, and I'll see that's listed right up there in my tab, and that we're ready to begin. We're going to place some text that we're going to use for formatting and showing how we can align text for forms as we're building those in InDesign documents. So I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu, and I'm going to select the Place command. Keyboard shortcut is Control-D if you're working on a Windows PC, Command-D if you're doing this on a Mac. I'm going to go to that Chapter 8 folder, and what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to double-click on the Student Contact Info Rich Text Format file. Before you double-click on it, though, make sure that the Show Import Options checkbox is not selected. And when I do so, you'll see that my cursor changes into a place gun, and that I can actually see the text that's loaded inside of that. Place that corner of that place gun in the upper left-hand margin of your InDesign document page and click the mouse button to place it on screen. This is the text that we're going to put at the top of our student order form. Let's begin formatting that. I'm going to get my text tool, and as I do that, I'm going to click 1, 2, 3 times to highlight the entire line, and I'm going to take that text and I'm going to make it minion, bold. I'm going to set that type as 36 points. on 36-point leading or flat leading, and I want to center that on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the paragraph formatting controls in my control panel, and I'm simply going to click on the Align Center button to put that smack in the center of my screen. Let's go back to the character formatting controls in our control panel. Select it, and we're going to highlight the text that goes below. So I'm going to hold the mouse button down just to the right of that word email in the third line of type that we haven't formatted yet. And I'm going to move my cursor up and to the left so it goes to the start of the first line where it says name in that type that we want to format. Now with that all highlighted, we're going to change that type to 14 points. Just make it a little bit larger. And we're going to change the leading from the auto leading value of 16.8 for default. We're going to actually make that 30-point type. And as we do so, that'll give us extra room so respondents can actually write in that information on the page. Now you don't see that right here, but we have a series of tabs that are loaded in. If you want to see what those tabs are, all you have to do is go to the Type pull-down menu and select Show Hidden Characters. And what that'll do is that'll allow us to see that we've got information in there for where the tabs are lined up for this document. I'm going to highlight all my type again, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to blow this up on the page so I can see all of this text at a large size with a little bit of extra room for the margins. I'm going to bring this up to 150% size, and then I'm going to center this page on the screen. So I moved it over to the right so I could see from margin to margin with a little bit of extra area, and I'm going to move it on the scroll bar just a little bit so that text is smack on the center of the page. This is important because it allows me to set up my tab ruler with the most detail so I can do very precise work as I'm working on the page. I'm going to go to the Type pull-down menu once again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the Tabs menu command. Keyboard shortcut for that on a Windows PC is Control-Shift-T. If you're working on a Mac, that keyboard shortcut would be Command-Shift-T. I'm going to select that, and as I do, it's going to place the tab ruler across the screen. And this shows why it's important to set up that page so you can see all the way across the column. Whether in this case as it fills the entire margin area on a single page document, or if you're working with, say, a 3-column format for a newsletter or magazine, so you can see that all the way across that narrow column as you're setting up your tabs. It allows me to see my alignment for the left side margin and the right side margin, just as I would if I was working in a word processing program like, say, Microsoft Word. And in fact, if you've done this type of work working with a word processing program, a lot of the analogies here are going to be very similar. And you'll get up to speed to this rather quickly. Now, I want to know where the center of the page is. Remember, we created an 8.5 by 11 letter-sized page to create our sample student order form. I'm going to go to the vertical ruler over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a vertical ruler guide at 4¼ inches, or smack down the center of the page. Now you'll notice as I look at the tab ruler that actually shows a slightly different measure. That in fact it looks like it's at 3¾ inches, and that's correct as well. The reason for that is because we set a 1/2 inch margin over here and a 1/2 inch margin over here. So the horizontal ruler shows where that measurement is as we're dealing with the page sheet size that we created in our InDesign document. The measurement that we see here on the ruler for our tabs deals with the width of the column that we've created.
which in this case is actually 7.5 inches. So what we're going to do next is we're going to set up tabs. That's what these little double chevrons that point to the right indicate. We're going to set up tabs so we can set up underlines to go after each of these fields: name, address, city, state, zip code, phone, and email. So with that said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my first tab. Now we have a series of these here, and again, if you've worked with word processing programs, there are no surprises here. The first tab is what's known as a left justified tab. That means the text goes off to the right. We have a center justified tab, which means that whatever text we have would be centered wherever we place that individual tab. We have a right justified tab, which means the text would go off to the left. And the indicator you have that lets you know which way the type's going to go is where this little tail is on the tab over here and the tab over here. We also have a decimal align tab. And what this does is this actually allows us to line up numbers on a decimal figure. So if you're building tabular information with figures, everything lines up the way you'd like them to be. Now remember that I set this guide to the center of my column as well as the center of my page. I want to set up a tab to line up just 1/16 of an inch away from that center point, 3.75. Now, to do that math, what I need to do is I need to subtract 1/16 of an inch in decimal terms, 0.0625 inches away. So I'm going to move this over to hit the exact spot I'm looking for. And it doesn't allow me to do that exactly where I'm at. The number I'm actually looking for is 3.6875 inches to make that precisely 1/16 of an inch. I can't find that number as I'm moving it back and forth. Now that's no big deal. All I do is I set the tab close, and then with that tab highlighted, and I can see what that is right there, I put in the number I want, which in this case is going to be 3.6875 inches, and then hit the tab key. When I do that, you'll see it skips just a little bit, and it actually places that precisely 1/16 of an inch away from the center of our column and of our page. Now, I want that text actually to line up to the left of this, although what we're actually going to put in is a leader, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But I'm going to first set that as a right justified tab with that highlighted, and what it'll do is it'll put that in as I click on this, just like so, and the little tail will go to the left, just as I can see right here on the ruler. I want to set an underline leader, so what I'm going to do in the spot where I can see that flashing cursor, just to the right of my number, is I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to press the button just to the right of the 0 on the typewriter side of my keyboard, just like so, to lay an underline down, and then hit the Tab key. And when I do so, you'll see that it lines that up 1/16 of an inch away, that I've actually got that tab that's built in. Now, with that, we've allowed that to put in our leader and define the space that we're going to allow people to write in information for their name, the city, state, the phone number, etc. What we also need to do is we need to line this information up to the left. So I'm going to place a second tab, 1/16 of an inch, just to the right of the center of that column and of our page. I'm going to click over here just like so, and you'll notice once again I can't hit exactly that number. When I bring that in to 3.75, really what I want to do is I want to take this to break that 3.8125, and I can't exactly hit that number. That's no big deal. All I do is bring that in, and then once I've got that set, I highlight that number and make it exactly what I want with numerical control. So it'll be 3.8125, and when I hit the Tab key, it's going to line everything up exactly where I want it. Well, not exactly. You'll notice over here that it remembered the setting that we had for the previous tab. That's the way InDesign works. So after we place that second tab, we want to change this to a left justified tab. And when we do so, you'll see that that type skips nicely right over to the other side of that tab area. The tail goes the way that the type's going to go. We need to create one more tab so we can create underlined areas to the right of address, zip, and email, just like the one that we have right here after name. So I'm going to place one more tab on the ruler. And once again, how I do that is I go into this area just above the ruler, this blank white area, and I'm just going to place a tab, in this case, right at 7 1/4 inches. Just as we had before, you'll see that that holds the settings of the previous tab. So what I want to do here is I'm going to take that and I'm going to make that a right justified tab. I'm going to take this leader and I'm again going to hold the shift key down and I'm going to hit the key just to the right of the 0 on the typewriter side of the keyboard to place an underline and hit the tab key. And I've got the underlines for address, zip, and email just like I have for name, city, state, and phone. I want to line this up all the way over to the right side margin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the mouse button down on that highlighted tab, and when I do, you'll see it gives a little line that shows exactly where it lines up. I'm going to move that till it sits perfectly on the right side margin, just like so, to the right of that right margin area as I'm looking at the arrow that points to the left just above my tab ruler, and when I let go of the mouse button, it'll line that all the way up across the page. So it's very easy for me to set these tabs and make this work. I'm going to now go back to the Fit in Window view by going Control 0, and you'll notice that in this case nothing happens, and there's a reason for that. And that reason is because the last thing I clicked on was in the tabs ruler. I'm not in the document itself. So to go back to that Fit in Window view, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click anywhere inside the page and away from that tabs ruler. Let's go back to the Fit in Window view by pressing Control 0 on Windows, Command 0 on the Mac. Now it takes that page and it brings it back to that Fit in Window view. I'm going to close this. We're going to go back and do some more tab alignment in just a little bit. But what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to set this up to make the type frame no larger than I need. And this is, as we said before, good practice whenever you're working with Adobe InDesign. There's no reason that any of these text frames or graphic frames that you create should take up any more space than absolutely necessary on the page. This makes it much easier for us to line and space up separate elements when we're working within InDesign. We're going to do this one more time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the File pull-down menu. I'm going to go to Place. You can use the keyboard shortcut Control D if you're working on a Windows PC, or Command D if you're working on a Mac. And what we're going to do in this case is we're going to take the payment information. I'm going to double click on that RTF file, or Rich Text Format document. Oops, made a mistake. I had that highlighted. As we've said before, that's no big deal. What we can do is we can simply go Edit, Undo. Keyboard shortcut for that is Control Z on a Windows machine, Command Z when you're working on a Mac. And when you select that, what it'll do is it'll bring the previous text back, and what I can do now is I can take that text that was in the place gun and I can put it on screen. I'm going to move it down to about, we'll say 5 inches deep against that left side margin. Click the mouse button, and what this has is all the information that we had built in before. So with this set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my text tool, click anywhere in the text, it really doesn't matter, and we're going to set all this type below to match up with what we had up above for our address information. So I'm going to go Control A since I'm working on a Windows PC to highlight it all. You'd go Command A if you're working on a Mac. You'll see that type set for 14 point on 30 point. That's exactly what we want to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up tabs to match up with what we'd set above. So once again, we want to go and set this zoom percentage so we can see all the way across the page with a little bit of extra space. What I did here was I moved that in to 150%. And we're going to take this information that we've got right here, and we're going to set the tab ruler to line up here and here for exactly what we're looking for. I'm going to go Control Shift T as in Tom to bring up my tab ruler once again. If you're working on a Mac, that keyboard shortcut would be Command Shift T. And you'll see these tabs aren't quite where we'd like them to be. They are loaded in though. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to move this cursor over here for my first column, right align tab, and set it exactly where I want it, that 3.6875, to move it a 1/16 of an inch away. Then I'm going to take this left align and I'm going to move it over to set it a 1/16 of an inch away from the center. Now again, what that should be is we're working with this, that should be 8125. And as we do that, it lines up precisely where we want things to be. We've got a little bit more work to do to line up things like what we want for the check, the money order, and the credit card, as well as what we're going to do for the shipping information down below. But we're going to do that in the next unit of our InDesign CS6 course. In this unit of our InDesign CS6 course, we're going to be doing a little bit more alignment work with our sample form. Additionally, we're going to be dealing with some graphic issues and use this sample form as a tool for learning more about working with spot color builds within Adobe InDesign, as well as placing inline graphics, putting pictures and graphic elements inside of text blocks with our InDesign documents. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of cleanup for the work that we've already done. I'm going to close the tab ruler right here, and I'm going to go into the Fit and Window view. As I'm working with a Windows PC for this chapter of the InDesign course, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control-0 to go back out in that Fit and Window view. If you're working on the Mac, of course, that keyboard shortcut is Command-0 to go out in that Fit and Window view. I'm going to get my selection tool, and I'm going to bring a ruler guide down to approximately 7.5 inches deep on my sample form. Then I'm going to take the top of the text frame that we placed and bring that down to that 7.5 inch horizontal ruler guide. Now when I do that, I can't see all of the type that I've placed inside here, and I know that because I can see this little red plus sign down to the lower right hand of the text frame. Whenever you see that, it means that there's more text available in this thread than you can actually see within the text frame size that's available. Let's stretch this down to the bottom of the page just a little bit further like this so we can see all of our text, and we'll know we can do that because that red box with the plus will change once again to a blue one with no content inside of it. I'm going to go back and get my text tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the last 3 lines of type, and I'm going to change the leading for that from 30 points down to 18 points. And when I do that, it actually brings that text within that bottom margin area. I'm now going to go back to the selection tool and bring that up so it lines up to the bottom margin of my sample form document. Now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a new logo and place it on the page. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control-D. If you're working on a Mac, your keyboard shortcut would be Command-D. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on the Total Training Online 2 Spot Color Outline EPS file. Double clicking replaces all that text that we had with the logo that I just placed. That's not what I want to do, so I'm going to go Control-Z to undo. It'd be Command-Z if you're working on your Mac. And what that'll do is put that back into the place gun with my cursor. And I'm going to put this down at the bottom of the first block of text that we set. Click the mouse button to place that logo on the frame. Now, as I look at this, what I see is I see green and blue and a lighter blue as the three color builds that are loaded inside of this logo. Now you can of course create those with process color, CMYK, components of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, but in this case what's actually happened is these are spot colors, precise colors that are used to match up with the trade dress, if you will, that Total Training uses for their graphic design work. If I go to my swatches panel right over here and open that up, I'll see that I have my process colors just like I've had before, the CMYK and also the RGB. But as I go to the bottom, I'll see that I have three new spot colors. Pantone 288, which is a deep blue, Pantone 355, which is a bright Kelly green, and then a tint of that Pantone 288. Now these are specifically what are known as spot colors. I can see that right here because it's got little boxes with spots here. But what that means is that we can load the press up with exactly these colors to get exactly these Pantone spot colors. 288, C stands for coated stock, and Pantone 355, which again stands for that coated stock for a bright green. And we can use those with the document. If you're only going to use one or two colors in a print job, and you're not using any color photographic images, you can save yourself a significant amount of money printing with the precise spot colors that you're looking for, as opposed to trying to make those up with cyan, magenta, yellow, or black. As a general rule, putting two or more spot colors in here is about the break-even line between what it might cost you to do that for printing in process color as opposed to printing with spot color. But to demonstrate what we're doing today, we'll be working with the spot color model and building this form with Pantone 288C and Pantone 355C throughout the rest of this chapter of our design course. I've got these colors available to me. As I work with this text down here, I can make that text one of these specific colors, and we're going to do that in just a little bit. But first what I want to do is I want to place some check boxes in specific spots down here in this bottom text frame. So I'm just going to click inside that text, just go right into the center right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change back to that larger display view percentage, or 150% zoom, so I can see all the way across the screen. I'm now going to get my rectangle tool that's hidden right over here. In this case it shows an ellipse, but if I hold the mouse button down, it allows me to choose between a rectangle, an ellipse, or a polygon tool. I'm going to get the rectangle tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a 1/4 inch rectangle that I'm going to use for my checkbox. Now I could drag that out and fine tune it, but if I want to do that just quickly and easily with precise numerical control, all I have to do is click the mouse button. And when I do that, it gives me the ability to create a rectangle. If you don't have the size that shows a 1/4 inch all the way around, just like I've got right here, change those factors to a 1/4 inch for the width and a 1/4 inch for the height, and say OK. And when I do so, what it's going to do is it's going to put a rectangle here with a black 1-point stroke all the way around it and a fill of none. Those are my default color settings. Now I'm going to change the rules right here by going to this little arrow just to the right of the stroke proxy. I'm going to change that by clicking on this little triangle just to the right of my stroke proxy and select Pantone 355 for my stroke. And when I do so, what it's going to do is it's going to take that stroke and it's going to make it green. Now, I'm going to take this box right here and edit, cut, put it in my clipboard. I'm going to get the text tool and I'm going to click just to the left of the word check in the second line of that frame, and I'm going to go Edit, Paste, and what that does, that places my green rectangle here as what's known as an inline graphic. It actually makes it a part of the text frame that I want to be working with. That box is a little bit larger than my type, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly drag a couple of horizontal ruler guides to match up with the height of my type. Then I'm going to get my selection tool and click on the rectangle. When I do that, it gives me the ability to scale this, just like a graphic that was standing alone. Even though it's inside this text as an inline graphic, it still has all the attributes and all the capabilities that are associated with the graphic rectangle that we created within InDesign. I'm going to scale this to fit inside of those two horizontal ruler guides. I'm going to start by scaling it down and then holding down the Command and Shift keys if you're working on the Mac, or if you're on a Windows PC like I am. I'm going to hold down the Control and Shift keys and actually take that box and set it just like so to make it the size of my text frame. And as I've done that now, I can see that green box actually lines up with what I'm doing to work with this document. Now I'm going to set a space in between that rectangle and the word check. I could just click on it with my text tool and hit the space bar, but what I want to do is I want to set a standard fixed space between these two elements. So I'm going to place the cursor right in between the two. And when I do that, I'm going to go to Type, and I'm going to select the Insert White Space, End Space menu command. When I do that, it actually creates a space that would be exactly the same size as a lowercase n for whatever font I'm working with. I'm going to be using these check boxes in a lot of areas right here. I'm going to place them here, of course, for the check and the money order and the credit card, but I'm also going to use them for options for my ship by area, to select whether I want to be kept informed about latest course offerings from Total Training, as well as placing them here for email, direct mail, and for phone. Just like anything else with InDesign, it's much faster to take work that you've done and simply duplicate it when you want to create multiple items. So I'm going to highlight both the rectangle and that end space that I set. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, keyboard shortcuts Control-C on the Windows PC, Command-C, of course, if you're working on a Mac. And then I'm going to click just before money order, and I'm going to go Edit, Paste. Keyboard shortcut here is Control-V on my Windows PC, Command-V if you're working on a Mac. And that'll place the second rectangle that I want to work with. I'm just going to use the keyboard shortcut from here on out. So I'm going to click just before credit card, and I'm going to go Control-V. I'm going to do the same here before UPS, USPS for the Postal Service, and FedEx. I'm going to go right after this S for Keep Me Informed about Total Training's latest course offerings. Just place a plain old space in here by hitting the space bar and go Control-V once again. And then I'm going to place those last options right here. Just before email, as I did that, it looks like it took that just a little bit further along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down like so. Do the same thing here before direct mail and before phone. And then I'm just simply going to adjust this up a little bit to give me that extra space I'm looking for. So I'm going to get my selection tool and move that up so it sits right along the bottom edge or my bottom margin for my sample form. Now, I've taken that and I've placed that information inside of here. I've got those check boxes that I want to build, and I've scaled them to fit. What I need to do is I need to take this type that's currently black, and I want to set that up in such a way that I've got all this set and all this built in those two color builds we're going to use for spot color. Pantone 288 and Pantone 355. So I'm going to get the text tool, and I'm just going to click anywhere inside this bottom text block, and I'm going to go Control A to select all, Command A if you're working on the Mac, and I'm going to take this type and I'm going to say make it Pantone 288. When I do so and I click away, I'll see that all that type is blue. Nonetheless, the inline graphics that I placed are actually set as green. I'm going to do some custom spacing. Put a little extra area instead of these spaces that are loaded in between here for the money order and the credit card, for the shipping options, and then for the email, direct mail, and phone information down at the very bottom of the form. So we know how to do that with the tab ruler. I'm just going to click anywhere inside the line, and I'm going to go Control-Shift-T on a Windows PC. It would be Command-Shift-T if I was working on a Mac, and what that'll do is that'll bring my tabs ruler up right here so it lines up with that column width. I'm going to clear out the old tabs where I had those underlines set to build here for the credit card and the expiration date and security code. And I'm going to insert new tab spots for these lines. So I'm just going to go to this flyaway menu inside of the tabs ruler, and I'm going to clear all the tabs that existed. I'm going to place new left align tabs at 1.5 inches and at 3.5 inches. Just like so. Now, the tabs are set in the line, but they're not set in the document. So I'm going to click just before the box. Make sure you don't click in the box. If you see this little parentheses that sits around, that would be putting type within that checkbox, and we don't have enough room to do that. So we're going to go just before it and click the mouse button to place the cursor just like so. I'm going to hit a tab right here and place that at 1.5. I'm going to do the same thing here for my credit card. Go just before the box, hit the tab key, and space that out at 3.5 inches. Now, when I go to the line down here, I don't want to delete all of the tabs because I've got the tab here for the underline for my security code, as well as to align this ship by information with the column that sits just above it. So I'm just going to get rid of one tab, and that's this one all the way at the end. You do that by putting your cursor on it like so and selecting it and simply dragging it entirely off the ruler. Now that tab doesn't exist. I'm going to go and I'm going to place a tab at 5.5 inches, a left align one right here, and then I'm going to place one at 6.5 inches. Place the tabs right here and right here. So I've got that lined up. And actually, as I look at that, that's not exactly what I'd like to do. I'm going to bring that in just a little bit closer. I can always move those tabs, just like I said. In this case, what I'll do is I'll kind of split the difference, so I'll make it 5 3/8 inches. As I look at that, that's spaced out pretty well. I'm going to take this one here, and I'm going to bring that in just a little bit too. I'm going to take that to 6 3/8 or 6.375 inches and space that, and that really looks nice and even. That looks pretty good. Let's go down to this last line here, and I'm going to put my cursor right inside of here. In this case, we can clear all the tabs once again. I'll set one at 1.5 inches. I'll set one at 3.5 inches. And what this will do is this will line up precisely matching the example I've got above. We've got one little piece of extra work we need to do. So I'm going to go Control-0 to that fit in window view. Command 0 on the Mac, and I'm going to go to the text up at the top of our sample student order form. Just click my text cursor anywhere inside of it and go Control A to select it all, Command A if you're working on a Mac. I'm going to take that color and I'm going to make it also Pantone 288C. Now we've done a good job here, so what I want to do is I want to go to save the file. We don't want to lose that handiwork. And I'll shut down this tabs ruler. And you've completed this unit. In this unit of our InDesign CS6 course, we're going to start setting up tables that we can use for entering information into our student order form. We're going to begin by creating a brand new text frame. I'm going to go about halfway down the form along the right margin, hold the mouse button down and drag a text frame to the left margin, setting it just beneath that logo that we placed a little bit earlier in our student order form. You'll see my text cursor flashing there. Tables are text elements. No matter how sophisticated you make them, they're basically formatted as text information. So what I'm going to do in this case is with my flashing cursor right there is I'm going to go Table, Insert Table, and I'm going to live with the default settings we've got right here of 4 body rows and 4 columns with a single header row that's set over the top. When I say OK, that's exactly what it's going to place for that text. 4 evenly spaced columns and 5 evenly spaced rows. One of them's the header, 4 of them are body rows. I don't want to set that up exactly that way. I actually want to fine-tune this a little bit to be based on the information that I'm going to place inside of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some vertical ruler guides, place one of them at 1 inch. I'm going to place a second one at 6.5 inches. I know that because I can see the tick mark on the ruler. I can also see the little gray information box that's set just to the right of my cursor. I'm going to place a third one at 7.25 inches. And now, working from left to right, I'm going to align these columns to match up with my vertical ruler guide. So first I'm going to take this one and move it to the 1 inch mark. I'm going to take the second column, I'm going to line that up at 6.5 inches. Then I'm going to take the third, I'm going to place it at 7.25. And finally, the right side, or the end of the fourth column, I'm going to put right against my right side margin. So it's easy for me to take that and bring it in. Now I want to insert text into the header and the body rows of the document. So starting with my header row, I'm going to put the abbreviation for quantity, QTY. I'm going to hit the tab key to skip to the next frame to the right, just like I would if I was entering text into a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. And this one's going to say subscription. Hit the tab key again. I'm going to place price. And then one more time, I'm going to hit that, and I'm going to hit total. Now, I've got that text loaded in with the default font that I've got set, my Minion Pro at 12 point on 14.4 point or auto leading. To highlight everything across this, I'm just going to go to the edge of that header row. I'll see my cursor changes to an arrow. Once again, the analogy is just like if I was working with a spreadsheet program like Microsoft Excel. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to make that 14-point type on 14-point or flat leading. I'm going to make it bold, and then I'm going to align it to the center. Now once I start highlighting multiple cells as I'm working with the document, what I'll see is that it in fact gives me another set of options that are specific to working with tables. For example, I can set the vertical alignment to the top, middle, or bottom. I can rotate type if I want to, put it upside down, although that looks a little goofy. Let's put it right side up once again. I can change the number of rows and columns I have in a document. I can set rules for my borders. And I've got other options that I can use to set things up as well. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it just as I've got it. Oops, take all my type and bring that right side up once again. And I'm going to set these rules not piece by piece, but I'm actually going to build them as I'm working with the table. But I'm going to get to that in just a little. Let me click in this cell right here, where I'm going to list the monthly subscription. And I'm going to hit the tab key to skip to the next cell. And that monthly subscription from Total Training Online is $24.99. Now if I hit a return here, it's not going to go to the next row. What it's going to do is it's going to expand the size of that individual cell. That's not the way I want to move around. I can either use the tab keys, as I've already demonstrated, or I can use my cursor keys. So if you're using a standard desktop keyboard, those are the ones in between the typewriter side and the calculator side of your keyboard. With laptops, these might be positioned a little bit differently. But I'm going to hit the down cursor to move down one row, and I'm going to hit the left cursor to move to the left one column. I'm going to put 6 months, move that over, hit the tab key, and 6-month subscriptions are $137.94. Go to my arrow cursors, go down to the next row, left to the previous column, and for 1 year, hit the tab key. That's $239.88. Again, down one row, left one column, and for 2 years, the price is $399.99. So I've set my text inside of here, and I can do some formatting as I'm working with this. As I look at these numbers right here, I'll see that they line up to the left by default, and sure enough, if I highlight these cells and go to my table side, I'll see that I can align type to the left, to the center, to the right, but I can't set up to line up to the decimal points. To do that, I'm going to have to get my tab ruler. So I'm going to go Control-Shift-T because I'm working with a Windows PC for this chapter of our InDesign course. Of course, if you're on a Mac, you'd make that Command-Shift-T. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a decimal ruler. In this case at 0.45 inches from the left side of the cell. And when I hit the tab key and place that tab, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it right here. And again, move that over to 0.45 inches. I can see that this lines up very nicely, just as I'd want for my decimal tabs. Let's close the tab ruler now. And let's do a little bit of formatting for what we'd like to set up here inside of this document. Now, I can, of course, format each one of these individual cells or columns to set these up the way I'd like them to be. But a faster way for me to do that formatting is to go to the Table pull-down menu, Table Options, and go to Table Setup. The keyboard shortcut for that is Control-Alt-Shift-B on a Windows PC, Command-Option-Shift-B if I was working on a Mac. Now as I do this, I have the ability to set all the rules that I found before working in the control panel with my table layout, but I also have additional options. For example, I can set what I want for fills and alternating patterns. I can do the same thing with strokes for rows and for columns, and I'll deal with that in just a little bit. But let's go to the basic table setup. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the table border from black to Pantone 288. So I'm going to make it that dark blue border all the way around. And if you have the preview box checked, you can actually look at your handiwork in real time as you're working with it. I'm going to go to the row strokes, and I'm going to set up an alternating pattern so that every other row has a stroke first of a solid stroke and the color of Pantone 288C. Then the second row, I'm going to change that weight and I'm going to make it the same as 1 point. And I'm going to change that to 355C, or that green. For the column strokes, if I chose alternating patterns, I could do that. But actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them all up with the same type of stroke, and I'll set how that works in just a little bit. I'm going to go to the fills, and now just as I set alternating row strokes, I'm going to set alternating fills. So the alternating pattern is again going to be every other row. I'm going to take the first row and I'm going to make it 288C blue, and I'm going to make that 10% shading. And if you look over here, you'll see that's exactly what I've got right there as I set up that shading. For the next set of rows, I'm going to change that color to 355 green. And again, I'm going to make that a 10% shade. And I can see that shading just as it shows up right here. Now I have the ability with headers and footers to set the rules for repeating those for every text column, once per text frame, or once per page if I'm setting up very long and very extensive table information to build that and make that work. I'm just going to say OK right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in close so I can see what I'm actually working with here. So I'm going to go back to that 150% view so I can see all the way across the column. Let me get the swatches palette out of the way. And now, as I've got that built, I can do the formatting that I'd like to have for my header row. So in this case, I'm going to select this, and I'm going to give it a fill of Pantone 288C, make that absolutely solid. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a type color of paper. So when I click away from this, just like so, I'll see I've got those colors set. Now, the last thing I want to do as I'm working with this is I actually want to set as I select all these cells, I'm going to take all of these borders that I've got set, click on the left side one, hold the Shift key down, so I've got all those selected, and I'm going to go inside of here as well, and I'm going to take the stroke and I'm going to make them all the same. I'm going to make those strokes as I'm working with them, right down here, 288C, and now every stroke I've got set in the document is going to be that dark blue. Let's save our handiwork, because we've done a fair amount of work right here. So we'll go File, Save, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control-S or Command-S, and we're at the point where we're finishing this unit of our InDesign CS6 course. In this, the final unit of Chapter 8 of our InDesign CS6 course, we're going to do some final cleanup to get everything together, add the last details for our student order form. But we're also going to create cell and table styles that match up with the original table that we built in the previous unit of this course. So we can actually duplicate that very quickly, working with Adobe InDesign, not just for this document, but any document we create in the future. Let's begin by putting the word subscriptions next to this word Total Training Online. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my text tool. I'm going to drag it down and to the right, like so. And I'm going to type the word subscriptions. Going to double click to highlight the entire word. And I'm going to make this Minion Pro bold, 30 points on 36 point absolute value for leading. I'm not going to use the parentheses that show that auto leading by default. After that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to take this type color right here, and I'm going to make that color not the default of black, but Pantone 288C. Because again, we're building a two-color spot color job. It'll print in 288 blue and then Pantone 355 green. So we've done that. We're in good shape. And in fact, as I look at the type that I have right here inside of my table, I'll see that it also is set in that default color of black. We're going to fix that before we continue as well. So I'm going to get my text tool. I'm going to highlight all of this type right down here. And I'm going to go to my swatches panel in this case. This is the easiest and best way to do that. And I'm going to change the color of the type from, again, that default of black to Pantone 288C. And when I click away, I'll see that that type now is that deep dark blue that we were looking for as well. So with that said, let's line subscriptions up with the logo that we've got right here. I'm going to grab a horizontal ruler guide and place it at the baseline. That's the bottom of lowercase letters without any descenders of the word online with this logo. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the text and move this down to where it matches. Again, we always want to get rid of the extra space that we have because we don't want overlapping frames when we're working with InDesign whenever we can help that. It just makes life a lot easier if we don't do that. So I'm going to place a brand new logo by first clicking on absolutely nothing, so nothing's selected, and then I'm going to go Control D on my Windows PC I'm working with here. If you're using a Mac, of course, Command D would be the keyboard shortcut to bring you to the Place dialog box. I'm going to double click on Total Training Spot Color Outline to pick up and place. My mistake. I had that selected before. Remember, we said we don't want to have anything selected. So I'm going to go Control Z, Command Z on the Mac. That will deselect my text frame and place inside my cursor that Total Training logo. So I'm going to click right over here, and I'm going to get rid of this extra space that we set for the table, just like I did a little bit earlier for what I did with the subscriptions. So I'm going to take this logo and I'm going to place it to match, just as it shows here, against the left side margin, in order my smart guide show the same space between the logo and the table as I now see here between the bottom of the table and my new Total Training logo. Now I'm going to want to make this a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to my control panel and I'm going to select the upper left hand corner reference point, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it half again, or 150% of its original size. I want to make sure that that constrained proportions for scaling link is selected. It's not broken. And then when I do that and hit the tab key, it'll take my logo and it'll make it bigger so I've got what I'm looking for. Now in this case, what I want to do is I want to place DVD courses just to the right of that, exactly like I placed subscriptions up here above for the Total Training Online table that's going to be immediately above it. So I'm going to go click on this and I'm going to go Control C to copy, then Control V to paste. Command C, Command V if you're working on a Mac, of course. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to bring it over just like so. Create yet another one of those horizontal ruler guides. So when I take this and line it up, I can change that from subscriptions to DVD courses, and I've got that set and lined up. Actually, just a hair lower. So with that selected, I'll use my cursor to bump it down, and that really lines up perfectly. So we're in good shape there. Now before I can use a table style or cell styles that we've created, I have to create those styles. Let me get the swatches panel out of the way. And I need to discuss the elements that are built into this. Now you may remember in the previous unit where I talked about how no matter how sophisticated the table you create is, that in fact it's simply built out of text elements and it's processed as text. That's especially important when we're talking about whatever information we put inside this table. So if you want to get good quality results for what you're working with, the first thing you want to do is you actually want to set up paragraph styles for what I've got here for these table elements, as I'm working with that for the header, over here for the text, and then over here to the right, so I've got that tabulated information that lines up by the decimal tab that we so painstakingly built into the previous table. I'm going to begin with the header information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my type tool, and I'm going to click into subscription. And you'll notice when I do that, it shows the attributes that we built into that before. That it's Minion Pro, bold, 14 points over 14-point leading, and that it's aligned to the center of the area that we want to work with. We're going to go to the Paragraph Styles button right over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new paragraph style. Double click on it and open it up. And that lets us see all the attributes that go with this style. And sure enough, it's bold, 14 points on 14-point leading. The color is paper. It's aligned to the center. And the tint, or lack of it, is actually 100% or absolutely solid. So we're going to name this TT header paragraph. I'll explain why I added that extra word in just a minute. Then we're going to double click in this cell right here, create again a brand new paragraph style. We'll name this one TT table text. And then we're going to move over to the right just a little bit like so. Double click inside the price to highlight part of it. Again, we're going to create a brand new paragraph style. Double click on that, and we'll call this TT table tabulation. It's basically designed, in this case with one tab, to align to the decimal point. It says at 45/100ths of an inch from the left-hand side of whatever cell we build that into. So I'm going to say OK. And as we do that, we'll have a TT header paragraph right up here. We'll have TT table text, just as shown over here. And then for numerical information, we'll have TT table tabulation, just as it shows right here. Now that we've built the styles that we want to use in the table, we can build the table styles that we want to work with. Now to get to that, what you do is you go to the window pull-down menu, you go to Styles, and then you select the Table Styles panel. And that brings this information up on the screen. Now there are actually 3 nested tabs underneath where the table styles are. I have general table information for building them from scratch. I have table styles for holding formatting for the entire table. And I have cell styles that I can apply for singular exceptions that I want to work with as I'm developing this information. Let's go to the Table Styles tab. And what we're going to do in this case is we're actually going to highlight all of this text that's set down for our basic table. Create a new table style, and now double click on that to build what we'd like to have. Now, in general, all of the attributes that are built into what I have selected are exactly what we have built into the Table Style Options dialog box. So for example, it shows that we've got those alternating fill rows between 10% of 288C and 10% of 355C. It also shows a couple of things that we didn't have built in. All right, the alternating row strokes between Pantone 288C and 355C, that's the green that we were working with. You'll remember in the previous unit that we applied a manual override when we created the original table style to get the results that we were looking for. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use this not so much as a perfect model for our new style, but a template that we can fine-tune and modify to build that. Which we're going to start with by going to the header rows and create a brand new cell style for whatever's going to be in the header rows. So I'm going to click on that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one TT header cell, and we're going to go with these attributes that we have built in. Now in this case, what it does, it shows that there's a top stroke color of Pantone 288 blue, a bottom stroke, left stroke, all those are the same, and that the right stroke color is once again all the same. So we're basically defining what's inside that area, all the stroke and the fill information that's in there. And for paragraph styles, so the type that we're going to place inside of it, we're actually going to make that one TT header paragraph style. So as we add that, it shows that we'll have all those attributes as well, which are basically that type is 14 points on 14-point leading, it's actually paper colored, and that it's centered on the page, just like we had built before. Let's go to the text. And as we do this, we've got rules for how we could build the insets for that information, where the baseline offset would be, and whether we rotate this text or not. We're not doing any of that here. We just want it laid out exactly like we have over here when we're looking at it inside of our previous table. Let's go to strokes and fills, and what this does is this shows that we've got a stroke weight of nothing. Okay, for Pantone 288C would be the color for the stroke, so we can leave that be because it's none. But we also want to take that color and we want to make that solid 288C as well. So when I click on that, I've got that information in. Finally, as we go to diagonal lines, we can use these for rotated type to basically set those slanted table legends that give us the ability to put more text into a shorter space. So with my TT header cell style, I've got all of this information. The paragraph style is TT header paragraph, which means Minion Pro bold, 14 points on 14 leading, and paper colored, aligned to the center wherever that paragraph's put. We've got the stroke colors that go all the way around, as well as the fill color of Pantone 288C. And when I say OK, that's going to be the rule that's set for our header rows when we work with them and we create. I've got my general table set up for what happens by default, and it shows that I have a table border all the way around at 1 point, Pantone 288 blue. The row strokes, it shows with that previous setting, because you remember we talked about the overrides. As I looked at it before in that overview, it said that this was 1 point Pantone 288 blue, and this one was going to be 1 point Pantone 288 green. We're actually going to change that to match, so there are no surprises here. And so we go to column strokes. We say that it's still set to black. I'm going to leave it just like this. We have the alternating rules that we set in this case. 10% screens of Pantone 288 blue and Pantone 355 green. So I'm going to say OK. Actually, let me change that table style name. I almost made a mistake here. And what we'll do is we'll call this TT table and say OK. I'm going to go back out to my fit and window view. So I'm going to go Control 0 for my fit and window view, Command 0 if you're working on a Mac. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually set one more text frame. So I'm going to get my type tool, drag this down underneath, just like so. There's my flashing cursor. And what we're going to do in this case is we're actually going to insert a new table with all of the styles that we created and were talking about before. So I'm going to go to Table, insert table, and in this case I want to make those body rows 8, so I want it to be 8 rows deep. 4 columns is just fine. 1 header row, and for the table style we're going to change that from basic table to TT table for total training. And when I click on that and I say OK, what it's going to do is it's actually going to create 8 rows in this body area, 4 columns straight across, with a separate header row that's got that Pantone 288 blue and the ability to set reverse type inside of it. Now, before I continue, I'm going to line this up to match with the type that we have up above, or this table. So I'm going to move all these guides between and each end of the table to line up perfectly for what we were working with before. Now I'm going to put type inside of this frame. In this case, I'm going to go QTY, that abbreviation we used for quantity, hit the tab key, going to go product, because we're actually selling DVD courses here, not subscriptions that let you take any course. These are more detailed, have more information, and they're placed for individual courses. Hit the tab key, make that price. Hit the tab key once again, make that total. And now when I go Control 1 to see that page at 100% size, I can see that this table actually matches this table. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. So if I go back out one more time to Control 0 to see my form, I can admire all the handiwork that we've done as we went through this chapter of our InDesign CS6 course. I can go File, Save, to save all the effort that I've actually put inside of it, and then I can match this up to the completed exercise that's saved within your working files to see how well I did to matching to the baseline. And that concludes this chapter of our InDesign CS6 course.